I have come to a brand new conclusion, and that is that Space Marines in Hearts of Iron 4 are mad strong. I know, shock, shock, horror, horror, right? It's not new information. However, what is the cheapest possible Space Marine that you can add to a division to give it a reasonable amount of armor and stats to make it worthwhile? Today, we're going to find out the cheapest possible Space Marine template to make it worthwhile. Take my hand. Let's go. Let's go. What would be more complete than to show a spreadsheet, right? Oh, spreadsheet meta is here. Let's just start off by starting something with the starting research that we do get at the very beginning of the game. What is a Space Marine? A Space Marine is a infantry division that has some armor. See this guy here, this little boy? This is the starting historical template for Germany, and it has 0 armor, so this is not a Space Marine. But if we added on, let's say, a light tank, oh, it's got 7.8 armor. It is now officially a Space Marine. And not a very good one, but it is a Space Marine. How do we assess the effectiveness of different tank divisions and assess how effective they are in production wise? Well, surprisingly, I was looking through the numbers on division templates, and I didn't even know it showed you a full breakdown of the increase in production costs. So if you go into the division itself, and then you add on, let's say, a light tank, and you hover over the number, you can actually see the increased production cost. 338.4 production cost for this light tank. A heavy tank is an extra 448, and the medium tank is 180. You're probably thinking, well, duh. It says the precise production cost. It's not as black as white as that, because if you look really closely on the right hand side, you can actually see that light tanks per battalion are 60, medium tanks are 50, and heavy tanks are 40. So you need less of this tank overall to make up a single battalion of them as a part of the division, which kind of skews the cost of the tank. So that means when you look at the tank here, this production cost in the bottom right is not technically what you're paying. It's technically this times 60. Hence the reason why the production cost of a light tank and a medium tank aren't really that far apart. Without further ado, let's make 3 examples. And we're going to try and make them as cheap as possible, because we're always focusing on how much armor we can get. Armor is our primary stat. So heavy machine gun light tank, 1-man turret. We don't need a radio. There's no incentive to go for any armor other than sloped. No, actually there is. That gives quite a lot of armor. That gives an extra 4-5 armor with only an extra 0.5 production cost. So we will go for that one. We're going to go for the cheapest possible suspension. At the end of the day, we might as well go for wheel suspension. It makes it 10% cheaper. Rivet armor, because it's cheap. And then the best possible engine for technically reliability, which is going to be the diesel. Drop off the engine, up the armor. Give it enough speed so it can actually move. All right, so here we go. The light boy. Don't forget to subscribe. Now what we're going to do is do the same for a medium tank as well as a heavy tank. One thing you'll notice about the interwar tanks, the mediums and the heavies, is the reliability isn't as good. But overall, 90% is still really decent. But overall, this is it. Be aware, we can't go for the cheap suspension with this because that's only available to the lights. And be aware, too, you get the crappiest medium turret. Well, actually, no, we could do the light turret. Never mind. That's fine. And then finally, the heavy, which we can actually go for a better chassis than the interwar. We can go for the basic heavy tank. Wee turret, machine gun, crappy suspension, diesel, armor me up, slope me up, engine me up. Oh man, that reliability is so good. We have light, medium, and heavy. And look, be very close attention to the production cost. 3.6 for the light, 4.9, practically 5 for the mid, and then the heavy, 11.8, practically 12. Those numbers aren't exactly like for like. They need to be times by how many they are per battalion. And the light is going to add an extra 216 production cost. And I think this meets the very threshold. The medium next, 17 armor. So we've got significantly more armor. However, the production cost is 247.50. Remember what I said before? The difference between the light and the medium production cost is not that much. There's not a lot in it. And then finally, we've got the heavy. The heavy gives 25 armor. That's a very big increase in armor. And the production cost is 475.20. So my personal opinion here, if it's any less than 10 armor, it's just not worth your time. So I wouldn't bother. So this light tank, 1936, Germany with no tech, just meets the threshold. Otherwise, I would not bother even including it. And the reason why I say that is, remember, tank as a part of our army only gives a portion of their stats towards the division's armor. So if it drops below 10, it's just not worth your time. So let's talk about some of the other variants. And this is a classic one where you add a light tank armored recon on. This used to be the old method of making Space Marines. So here we go. It's added a total of 4.2 armor for the division. And the additional production cost of this is 86.4. So the production cost is unbelievably small. But unfortunately, it's just not enough armor to worthwhile. Honestly, hand on heart, this is totally pointless. Basic infantry guns can just pierce this. Artillery can pierce this. So this is pointless. All right, so let's move towards 1936 to 1939 technology. So let's begin the research spree. So there we go. So now we're in 1939 technology realm. So let's make the tanks in question. Just mid version 2. And once again, super cheap. Machine guns. We can go for welded armor now. And overall, that is cost effective in the long run. Diesel armor can add significantly more armor onto the tank. But remember, there's a downside to this because it means it makes the tank slower. Sloped armor can be done, as well as armor skirts, which give a little bit of extra armor as well. Now we need to add speed to make it go. Speed doesn't matter because the speed of infantry is 4 kilometers per hour. So as long as we're 4 kilometers an hour, we will do just fine. And there we go. We now have our new tank. Now we need to improve all the other ones as well. So welded, add the extra armor points on. And also we need to add on the skirts. This is the version 2. Next up, we add on the skirts to the heavy. Welded armor, all the armor points. There will argument to be said here that the armor isn't as important, but remember, when we move into 1939 territory, the technology is getting better, so you need more armor so you can't get pierced. At the end of the day, there's no point having a Space Marine with armor being so low that everyone can pierce it. It's just kind of pointless. Anyway, there's the 3 tanks we've got now. Now we have 1939 technology realm, but there's also one other thing we're missing as well. Oh, what's the third one, you think? That's right. Now we have the option in 939 to go for the heavy flamer as well. So we'll go for welded armor. We have to add a flamethrower on it. Smallest turret, and it is considered a flamer, which unfortunately suffers from a big penalty because it's a flamer. And goodbye armor. It had a lot of armor, now it's got significantly less. All right, we now have 4 tanks, boys. Here we go. The light in 39 light tank adds an extra production cost of 450. We've actually doubled, surprisingly. And would that result in more armor? 20.9. We've doubled the amount of armor. So it's a like-for-like improvement. That's just interesting. Next up, we have the medium. Adding an extra production cost of 467.50. Once again, as I said, to be very close attention between the light and the medium. The production cost is not much. And now the gap has closed even more. The result of that is an extra 45.6 armor. So now you can see, look at how the medium moves ahead significantly. So when it comes down to bang for your buck for one single tick of armor, you're actually better off with the medium tank in this circumstance. And then finally, last but definitely not the least, we have the heavy 712.80 is the production cost, and that will give you 45.6 armor. Wow. It's the exact same cost for the heavy. So the very first medium tank, the 938 medium chassis, is actually really good. So let's talk about the alternative world of flamers. So once again, not a lot of armor from this, but you gain 17.1. And the extra production cost for this one is 267.30. This one is actually super cost effective. And to be fair, it's significantly better than the light tank. Significantly. Wow, there's some numbers here that's actually really surprising me because I did not expect to see the light do so unbelievably badly. There is also one variable I forgot to talk about. Is the heavy tank design. I give an extra 5% armor. Your imagination can add an extra 5% to these numbers to see what difference they would make. So let's talk about the future. Let's go into the future. And I feel a little bit reluctant to do this because it's going to create some really weird examples, but you know what, balls to it. Let's do it anyway. All right, are we ready for the big boys? There is also one note that I forgot to mention that I feel like is important. That cast armor adds 20% more armor than welded armor. So it might be an option if you're looking to squeeze out as much armor as possible. But since we stick with the welded the whole way, we'll stick all the way to the very end. All right, and here we go. Light, medium, heavy, super heavy. So we've entered the realm of 1943 Hearts of Iron 4 game. I personally don't think this is a good test, this one, because I feel like in HOI, when you've reached 1943, the game's technically already concluded. But you know what? For the purpose of this test, make you guys happy, I'm going to do it, okay? First of all, light tank, adding you 29.6 armor with a production cost of 516. The medium tank is adding you 70 armor on the dot, which has a production cost of 588.5. the heavy. Production cost of 827.2, and the armor is 103.7. So we feel like with the gap now between medium and heavies has moved because we've got the new bigger model of the heavy, and the newer models of heavies are a lot better than the previous models. However, the production cost goes up significantly, but the armor doesn't follow suit exactly. And finally, the super heavy tank. Production cost of 1381. And then the armor it gives is 117.2. Wow. That is not worth it in comparison. The heavy tank is superior in cost effectiveness. There's a final mention as well, and that is a heavy flamer tank boy. This is a very advanced heavy flamer here with 38.9 armor. And the production cost is 310.2. So now we have the ratios with the lower number is the better number. So initially, at the very start of the game, the winner is the medium, surprisingly. That would not be what I would imagine, to be fair, because the medium tank has some pretty awful reliability because it's the interwar medium. Don't forget that. Now, when we move to 939, I think everything really changes. To be surprisingly, the light tank becomes less effective, which is really interesting. It feels like the extra production cost you put into light don't translate directly into the stats, which is surprisingly when it comes to armor anyway. It looks like investing more armor into a light does actually seem to be counterproductive. But the best performer, even better performing than the 1936, is the medium 1936, with surprisingly the production difference between the heavy tank and the flamer as an add-on is exactly the same. That really surprised me. And then we move to the 1943, the area of HOI4 where the game is technically already over, and the winner by the tiniest of increment is the heavy tank flamer, coming just ever so slightly ahead of the regular heavy tank. From my perspective, it feels to me like the light is the winner initially, because remember the light tank 1936 will have the most reliability, so therefore you're less likely to get breakdowns, with the interwar models of the medium would probably result in a lot of losses. Then in the 1939 example, the medium is the winner, but no shadow of a doubt, the heavy tank in 1943 is the winner when it comes down to just pure armor ability compared to the production that you put into it. Remember, there are loads of things to talk about this. Loads of noteworthy things. Like, first of all, you don't tend to make tanks with machine guns on the front of them. This is kind of a one-trick pony, because if this tank gets pierced, the stats don't really add on to the division as a whole, so therefore you're gaining a little bit of breakthrough. To be fair, the only thing this tank does is breakthrough and armor. That's all it does. And I suppose a third option, an honorable mention, is the hardness is interesting. A little bit of hardness is always goes a long way. But overall, it's not adding any other stats. So just be aware that if this tank gets pierced, it doesn't have any extra functionality as a part of that infantry division. So it's important to go as hard as you can with the armor. Hence the reason why, from my perspective, the overall winner is the medium tank. Because remember, a whole game will consist of moving from one technology to another to another. The medium seems to be consistent all the way through. It's the cheapest, and it overall is the most cost-effective, particularly in 1939, where it kind of drops off just a little bit, a tiny little bit, in 1943. There are probably so many variables of this that I've not covered, and I'm happy for you guys to critique my work and peer review this very unscientific study in the comment section below. But this is an interesting findings. There's definitely lots of different conclusions to bear from this. Medium tanks are universally good all the way through, but drop off at the very end. And heavies definitely are a win late game. But will you reach 1943 before your PC explodes? That is the big question. Do you want a part 2? 20k likes. 20k likes, I'll talk about tank destroyers, I'll talk about SPGs, and I'll talk about AA, because I think the AA actually comes out on top of all three combinations. And if you want more, guess what? I've got more for you. It's here. This one. Give it a click. Promise you, you won't regret it.